as having facets. Okay, so that's our light source coming in, same here. So what you would expect, of course, is that the lightest part of this will be on this side. I'm doing this fairly hastily. I wouldn't advise you to draw as badly as I am. That's just to make a point. So probably the brightest part, I have to press pretty hard with this chalk to get it a little bit lighter, will be somewhere in that vicinity, either right on the edge or somewhere in the form. And then slowly but surely, as the form moves away from the light, clearly you get to less and less intensity. Probably if the light's coming from above, it'll be on the top of the object as well. There might be a slight distinction here. This might be just a fraction light or vice versa, depending on the actual angle of the light. And now we get to the Terminator, which is the darkest part of the shading. So this is the shaded side of the object. The shadow is the thing that's cast, okay? If I was drawing shadows, wouldn't be worried too much about this. I'd be drawing the shadow, you know, whether it was falling on this form or whatever. But I'm not talking about shadows today. That's why I've used the black drape so that the shadows are not so conspicuous. There will be shadows within the forms. You know, the nose will possibly cast a shadow onto the lower part of the face. It's there. If you want to draw it, that's fine. But really, I'm more interested in the shading. Okay, so I make a distinction between shadows and shading. Cast shadows, shading is just where the form has moved away from the light. So you probably expect that this would just get gradually darker and darker as it moves away from the light source. But actually what you often find, not invariably, but what you often find is that there will be reflected light. Okay? So that the second brightest part of the object will be here. And if it's very strong light, you'll find that the edge of the Terminator is very sharp, or relatively sharp. I mean, on a round object, it will never be a sharp line like we have here, which I'll do in a second. And if the light's not so intense, then it'll be much softer. The Terminator, this is the Terminator here, this dark bit. The darker I'll make it, the more visibly you may see it, I hope. So this is the secondary light source, and it's this light source coming through and hitting other parts of the room and bouncing back in. Okay, so on this object, speed things up here. Again, this is the light surface. Takes a lot of time, doesn't it? Much slower than drawing lines, that's for sure. And actually you can see the three-dimensionality of this object because of the planes. Here, the only giveaway really are the ellipses. But here it's quite clear that the Terminator, I hope it's quite clear, that the Terminator is that middle plane if we're dealing with reflected light. And one of the things I'm hoping you'll notice is that the lines that I've put in dissolve to a certain extent into the plane. Okay, so what is a clear line to start with becomes part of the plane itself. And that's where you can use the eraser or make the initial marks. We're talking about drawing the face, make the initial marks lightly. Then when you start putting the planes in, the tones I should say, for the various planes, those edges may dissolve and become part of the overall tone of the plane, okay? So this is the Terminator here in the middle, effectively. And in fact, even within this, that plane there might have a tiny bit of tone, but this is an optical thing, it's called the Mach effect. So textured. This part of the shadow will be the darkest of the Terminator, that which is against the highlight edge. That's the highlight edge. This is not as light here. Look at that nice application. It will appear to be just slightly darker there, okay? And slightly darker here. I mean, this is no big thing. If you just understand that whole plane, it's the same. But in this shadow, or in shading, I think, not shadow, in the shading, you'll find that the darkest part of that will be up against the lit side. Okay? So a lot of the planes you're looking at in the face, you know, change direction in the hair or the cheek or whatever it might be. The drawing you did this morning, it basically is as if somebody had gone over all those, the contours at the edges of the planes with a texter pen. So when you do the drawing now, you may put these in lightly, draw it as you did this morning, draw them, a lot of you did really nice drawings this morning, I thought. So you're doing much the same sort of thing. So don't start using tone straight away. My advice would be to do another wireframe drawing with the capacity to adjust, and then when you start introducing the tone, these edges, some of them may well melt, if I can use that word, or become part of the plane. So we're no longer looking at lines, we're looking at the planes. You can imagine if this was painting, you might, with your underpainting, use one colour and go in and paint the whole thing with lines to get things in the right place, and then as soon as you bring the paint in, you obliterate those lines underneath with the paint over the top. So this might be slightly darker, you might be looking for a slight Terminator along that edge. So you won't always get Terminators on a grey day. I'll demonstrate with these things here, if I can just get you to move.